On the pod. Okay, I have, excuse me, besides yawning, a couple little booklets, I guess you want to say, because they're not like real books or anything like that. They're just like pamphlets, booklets of Serge Monast. This one is the Toronto Protocols 6.6.6. And I'm just going to jump right into it, and we're going to begin to read it. Serge Monast, 1945 to 1996, was a Canadian investigative journalist, poet, and essayist. He is known to English-speaking readers mainly for Blue Beam Project. He was an active member of the Social Credit Party of Canada. In the early 1900s, not 1900s, in the 1990s, he started writing on the theme of the New World Order and conspiracies hatched by secret societies, being particularly inspired by the works of William Guy Carr. Now, I've read some of his things too. He founded the International Free Press Agency, AIPL, Agence Internationale de Presse Libre, where he published most of his work on these themes, achieving some prominence with an interview on esoterist and ufologist Richard Glynn's TV show, in which he repeatedly warned his audience about the dangers of a world government. In 1994, he published Le Project Bluebeam, in which he detailed his claim that NASA, with the help of the United Nations, was attempting to implement a New Age religion with the Antichrist at its head and start a new world order via technologically simulated second coming of Christ. He also gave talks on this topic. In 1995, he published his most detailed work, Les Protocoles de Toronto 6.6.6, modeled upon the protocols of the Elders of Zion, wherein he said a Masonic group called 6.6.6 had for 20 years been gathering the world's powerful to establish the New World Order and control the minds of individuals. By 1995 and 1996, Monast said he was being hunted by the police and authorities for involvement in networks of prohibited information. He died of a heart attack in his home December 1996 at the age of 51, the day after being arrested and spending a night in jail under very strange and suspicious conditions. Author's note. End of June 1967 in Montreal, there is Expo 67 in Ottawa. There are the final preparations for the centenary of the Confederation. In the U.S., it is the challenge of the Vietnam War, and through the country, the flower power. We are close to the events of May 1968 in France, the explosion of nationalism in Quebec, the Woodstock Festival in the U.S., but at the same time, the end of June 1967 marks the final preparations for the development of the plan of the fall of nations by the highest levels of Anglo-Saxon Freemasonry in Toronto, Canada. This secret meeting, highly confidential, is organized by the 6.6.6. I'm just going 666 because that's just easier to do, so they call themselves. That is those who run the 6 largest banks in the world, the 6 largest energy consortia on the planet, including the oil part, and the 6th largest consortia of agri-food, which includes the control of the main food roads of the world. These 666 being the most senior international financiers will define within their meeting a common strategy for the absolute control over the world trade on the possession of the energy weapon, the open gateway of the 21st century, and the international control of the food, which also includes for them the pharmaceutical companies, which include in turn the global market for vitamins and vaccines. Their plan boils down to 3 major themes: the economic, the political, and the social policy for the 70s and 80s. If successful, It must inevitably lead to the capture of global power by implementing the New World Order, the same which U.S. President George Bush will do much to promote in the early 90s. The title of the document of the 666 Paneum and Circuses from bread and circus games, i.e., an old Roman phrase to describe how the emperors used to entertain and feed the masses so that they would be distracted from taking an interest in politics. Bread and circus. Excuse me. The document, Bread and Circus, Globalist Project Goal, the vital genocide for the benefit of the hidden profit. Project financing means, among other things, use of humanitarian aid, international food aid to fund the multinationalists of the 666. The document. All the historic periods having led to the decline of civilization were quite marked, without exception, by the spirit of the wandering people. Today, we have to make so that this spirit is translated by a world society of the leisure under all its forms. This leisure has to consist of the sex and of the drugs and of the sport and of the travel and exoticism and leisure activities in general, but accessible to all the sectors of society. The man has to manage to believe that it is modern and that his modernity consists of his capacity and his possibility of being able to enjoy much and now all which surround him. To achieve the objective, it is imperative to be able to infiltrate the medias, radio, television, newspapers, settings of fashion and culture, circles of new music by which we will influence, for sure, all the layers of Western societies, thus taking under the control of the senses the youth, tomorrow's adults. We will have consequently the way clear for infiltrating and transform in depth without being disturbed the politics and the legal system and the education, and thus allowing us to radically change the course, the future direction of societies covered by our plan. The populations, we know it, do not have any historical memory. They tirelessly repeat mistakes of the past without realizing that these mistakes had driven their forefathers before them to the same forfeitures as they will live for the worse before the end of the century. See, for example, that their grandfathers had lived at the beginning of the century thanks to relentless work of our predecessors. After having experienced without limitation the liberation of the morals, the abolition of the morality, in other words, the wandering of the spirit, they experienced the economic crisis and then the war. Today, their grandchildren and their children will go straight to an outcome similar, even worse, because this time he will finally allow us to establish our new world order. But none of them are able to realize this. They will all be too preoccupied to excessively satisfy their most primary sensual needs. A standard generally more important, and that has always proven itself at the beginning of the century in the construction and implementation of the communist system by the late lamented senior officers of our lodges, is the profitability of the exception. In principle, we know the exception proves the general rule that is contrary to it, but in our vocabulary, it is the exception that should be imposed to all. We need to make sure to make exceptions in different spheres of the society as being new rules applicable to all conditions, a primary objective of all the future social protests carried out by the nation's youth. Thus, exception will become the fuse by which all the historical society will collapse on itself in shortness of breath and an unprecedented confusion. The foundations of the Western society, in their essence, originate in a straight line from the Judeo-Christian heritage. Excuse me. It is precisely the same heritage which made of family the node, the cornerstone of all existing social structure. Our predecessors, who had financed the revolutionary writers of the late 19th century and early 20th century, had understood the importance to divide, then to shatter the vital nucleus, if they wanted to, in Russia, to succeed in setting up the new communist system at that time. And that is precisely what they did by making meticulously produced by nonconformist philosophers and writers at the time a manifesto to the glory of the God state, which shall have the absolute priority on the individual, on the family. To end with certainty in the construction of a world government, a new community world order, where all the individuals, without exception, will be subjected to the world state of the new order, we have to, first of all, remove the family, what will entail at the same moment. Hush, Charlie. Shh. I don't know why he just does this. Because he's a dog. You done? You done, honey? Shh. Done. Okay. To end with certainty in the construction of a world government, a new community world order, where all the individuals, without exception, will be subjected to the world state of the new order. We have to, first of all, remove the family, what will entail at the same moment the disappearance of the ancestral religious teachings, and in the second place, level all the individuals by removing social classes, in particular middle classes. But we have to proceed in such a way that all these changes appear as arising from the popular will, and that they have the appearance of the democracy. In using isolated cases, but amplifying them to the extreme, with the help of student protests infiltrated by us, journalists favorable to our cause, and politicians purchased, we will be able to put in new organizations having all the appearances of modernity as an office of child protection, protected by a charter of rights and freedoms. For the success of our world plan, the Red Plan, it is necessary us to implement in all the Western societies of the 70s offices for the protection of children, among which the officials of young intellectuals without experience, freshly out of universities, where are highlighted our internationalist principles, will comply literally, without proper judgment, the Charter of the Rights of the Child, who will dare to oppose this without being identified at the same time with the barbarians of the Middle Ages. This charter, painstakingly developed in our lodges, we will finally eliminate any parental authority in the family by shattering people fiercely opposed to one another for the protection of their personal interest. It will encourage children to denounce parents, very authoritarian, because too traditional, too religious. It will contribute thus to subjecting parents to a collective psychosis of fear, which inevitably will cause, in a general way in society, a relaxation of parental authority. Thus, we shall have succeeded in the first instance to produce a society similar to that of Russia of the 50s, where the children denounce their parents to the state, and this without anyone noticing. Thereby transferring to the state the parental role, it will be much easier thereafter of us to monopolize one by one all the responsibilities that had been, until to date, the exclusive responsibility of the parents. This is how we can make be considered. That really makes no sense on how they worded that. This is how we can make be considered by all as an abuse against children, the traditional religious education of the Judeo-Christian origin. In the same time, but at another level, we shall make register in the highest laws of the nations, than all the religions, the worship and the religious practices of any kind, including the witchcraft and the magic, must all be respected in the same way as the others. This will then be of a disconcerting ease than to transfer this role of the state in relation to the child to the highest international bodies, such as the United Nations. Understand this well. Our goal is not to protect children or anyone from another, but to cause the collapse and subsequent fall of nations, which are a major obstacle to the implementation of our New World Order. This is why the Office of Child Protection must be invested with absolute legal authority. They must be able, as they see fit, but always under the pretext of protecting the child, to remove them from their original home environments and place them in family backgrounds or foreign government centers that have been established for our internationalist principles and religions. Therefore, it will complete the final breaking of the Western family unit. For without the protection and monitoring of their original parents, these children will be permanently handicapped in their psychological and moral development, and consequently represent natural prey, easily adaptable to our global aspirations. For guaranteed success of such an enterprise, it is essential that civil servants working in these offices in the service of the state are young, without past experience imbued with theories which we know empty and ineffective, and especially should be obsessed with the missionary spirit of the great protectors of children at risk. Because for them, all parents must represent as potential criminals, potential hazards to the welfare of the child, here considered to be a god. An Office of Child Protection and Bill of Rights of the Child have no reason to be without children at risk. In addition, the exceptions and the historical examples used for their implementation, eventually sooner or later up disappearing if they were not constantly fed with new cases occurring on an ongoing basis. In this sense, we must infiltrate the education system of the nations in order to make disappear under the cover of modernity and evolution the teaching of religion, history, and good manners, while diluting at the same time under an avalanche of new experiments in the milieu of the education, that of the language and mathematics. In this way, by removing from the younger generations any basis and any moral boundary, all knowledge of the past, and therefore any national pride, so all respect for others, all the power and knowledge of the language of science, and thus reality, we will help build a youth largely disposed to all forms of crime. In this new universe, fragmented by the fear of parents and their abandonment of all responsibility regarding their children, we will have a clear path to form in our own way and according to our primary objectives, a youth where arrogance, contempt, humiliation of others will be considered as a new basis of affirmation of self and freedom. Well, we're living in that day, man. But we know from past experience, even, that a similar youth is already doomed to self destruction because this is fundamentally individualistic, so an anarchist by definition. In this sense, it cannot possibly represent a solid basis for the continuity of any society whatsoever, and even less a sure value for the care of its elderly. In the same vein, it is also imperative to create a charter of rights and individual freedom and the office of citizen protection by dangling to the masses that these innovations are part of the modernity of the new societies of the 20th century. In the same manner and at the same time, but at another level, to pass new laws for the respect and individual freedom, as in the case of the family, but on a level of the society. These laws will come into conflict with the rights of the community, thereby leading the societies mentioned right to their self-destruction. Because here the inversion is complete. It is no longer society, the right of the majority, that must be protected against individuals that can threaten, but rather the right of the individual, which needs to be protected against the potential threats of the majority. This is the goal that we set. To complete the breakdown of the family, the education system, thus the society in general, it is essential to encourage the sexual freedom at all levels of the Western society. It is necessary to reduce the individual, therefore the masses, to the obsession of satisfying their primal instincts by all means possible. We know that this step represents the culmination by which any society will eventually collapse on itself. Had it not been so in the Roman Empire at its height, and similar to all civilizations throughout history. By men of science and the laboratories funded by our lodges, we have managed to develop a chemical process that will revolutionize all the Western societies and regulate to oblivion forever moral principles and religious Judeo Christians. This process, in pill form, will open the way wide to the sexual freedom without consequences and push the women of the nations to want to break with what will then be perceived as the yoke of the past, the slavery of women subjected to men and the traditional Judeo-Christian family. Excuse me. Formerly center and pivot of the family unit, the modern woman, now as an independent individual, wants to break with its traditional role, break away from the family, and lead her life according to her own personal aspirations. Nothing more natural, we know, but where we will intervene strongly, it will be to infiltrate all the new feminine protest movements by pushing their logic to its extreme limits of consequence. And these limits can be found already registered in the definitive breakdown of the traditional family and Judeo Christian society. This sexual liberation will be the ultimate means by which it will be possible to us to remove the popular consciousness any reference to the good and to the evil. The collapse of this religious and moral barrier will permit us to finish the process of the false liberation of man's past, but which in reality is a form of slavery that will be profitable to our globalist plan. This open door for the encouragement of sexual freedom, to the divorce, to abortion on demand, to the legal recognition of diverse forms of homosexuality, will help us to radically change the historical basis of the legal right of the societies. It being a major asset to push for all the individuals in a general relaxation of the morals, to divide the individuals as compared against each other, according to their instincts and their own interests, to destroy the future of the youth by pushing the adverse experiences of early sexuality and the abortions, and to break morally the future generations by pushing them to alcoholism, different drugs, which our senior International Lodge officers will take charge of taking the control at the world level, and in the suicide, that it be considered by a youth disillusioned and abandoned to themselves as being the chivalrous end. Let us deceive the youth of the nations by showing him to their parents as being irresponsible, atheistic, immoral, searching after all only for the pleasure, for the escape, and for the wild satisfaction of their instincts at the price of the lie, the hypocrisy, and the treason. Let us make of the divorce and the abortion a new social custom accepted by all, thus encouraging him to the criminality under all the forms and to take refuge in different groups out of reach of the family environment that it will perceive inevitably as being a threat for its own survival. The social fabric being so upset forever, it will be possible to us from then on to act on politics and the economic of nations, to subject them in our thank you, to come there to acceptive strength, our plans of the new world order. Because it is well necessary to acknowledge the nations, to pride that they will be then to be able to count on a strong youth, on a society where the individuals grouped around a common ideal, strengthened by indestructible moral ramparts, would have been able to provide its historical support, can only then abdicate to our global will. Thus, we can then inaugurate what was so much announced by our past creations, the communist system which prophesied a world revolution set into motion by all the rejected of the earth, and Nazism, by which we had announced a new world order for 1,000 years. That is our ultimate goal. The work rewarded for all the valorous dead in labor for its accomplishment for centuries. Saying it loud and clear, all the brothers of the lodges past died in the enmity for the realization of this ideal to us is now possible to touch with the fingertips. It is well recognized by all that the man, once after having assured their basic needs, food, clothing, and shelter, is much more inclined to be less vigilant. Let us allow him to lull his conscience while orienting to our way in his mind, creating in himself pure peace of favorable economic conditions. Therefore, during this period of 70 years, where our agents will infiltrate all over the different spheres of the society to accept our new standards in education, legal law, social policy, and we will make sure to spread him around an economic climate of confidence. Labor for all, the opening of credit for all, leisure for all will be our boogie for the illusory creation of a new social class, the middle class. Because once our objectives reach the class in the middle, between the secular poor and we the rich, we will definitely remove by cutting off all means of survival. This way, we shall make nation states the new parents of the individuals through this reliable climate where our international agents will have done what's necessary to push aside any specter of world war. We shall encourage the excessive centralization for the state. In this way, the individuals can acquire the impression of a total freedom to explore, while the legendary burden of personal liabilities will be transferred to the state. Thus, it will be possible to sharply increase the burden of the state by multiplying without any limit body of intellectual public servants. Ensure for years in advance of material security, they will be consequently perfect for executors of governmental authority, in other words, of our power. And that's something else. I think about it, guys. Seriously. This is written when? Thus creating an impressive body of officials who in itself will form a government within the government, irrespective of the political party that is in power. This anonymous machine can serve us one day means of leverages when the moment comes to accelerate the economic collapse of the nation states, because these will not be able indefinitely sustain such mass salaries without having going into debt beyond their means. On the other hand, this same machine will give an image cold and uncaring of the government apparatus and how this complex machine, useless in many of its functions, will serve as a cover and protection against the populations. For who would dare to venture through the mazes of such a labyrinth in order to assert his personal grievances? Always during this period of general intoxication, we shall also take advantage of it to buy or eliminate, according to the necessities of the moment, all the company directors, the persons in charge of the major bodies of state, centers of scientific research, among which the action and the efficiency would risk to give too much owe to the nation states. The state should not absolutely become an independent strength in itself, which would risk to escape us and to put in danger our ancestral plans. We shall also watch to have an absolute control on all the supranational structures of the nations. These international bodies must be placed under our absolute jurisdiction in the same sense, and to guarantee the profitability of our influence with the populations, we shall have to control all the news media. Our banks will thus see to finance only those who are favorable to us, whereas they will oversee the closure of the more recalcitrant. I don't know. It should go almost unnoticed in principle in the populations, whom they will be absorbed by their need to make more money and to entertain themselves. We shall have to take care with finalizing from now on the phase of de-regionalization of the rural regions, begun at the beginning of the economic crisis of 1929. Overcrowding the cities with our bedfellow of the Industrial Revolution. They have that in quotation marks. Isn't that interesting? The rural owners, by their economic independence, their capacity to produce the basis of the food supply of the states, is a threat for us and our future plans. Piled up in cities, they will be more dependent on our industries to survive. So they're buying all the farmland. We cannot allow ourselves the existence of groups independent from our power. So, you can't grow your own food. Thus, let us eliminate the landowners by making of them obedient slaves of the industries being under our control. As for others, let us allow them to get organized in agricultural cooperatives that our agents will infiltrate to direct them better according to our future priorities. Through the state, let us attempt to highlight well the compulsory respect for the diversity of the cultures, of the peoples, of the religions, of the ethnic groups. All those were in quotation marks, just to let you know, which are all ways for us to convey the personal freedom before the notion of national unity, which will allow us to divide better the populations of nation states, and so to weaken them in their authority and in their capacity to maneuver. Pushed to these extreme limits, but on the international plan, this concept in the future will urge the ethnic groups of the various nations to group together to claim individually each their own part of power that will finish ruining nations and will make them burst in endless wars. When nation states will be so weakened by so much infighting, quite established on the recognition of the rights of minorities and their independence, that the nationalists divided into various culture and religious factions will oppose blindly in fights without outcome, that the youth will have totally lost contact with its roots, then we can use the United Nations to begin to impose our new world order. Moreover, at this point, the humanitarian, social, and historical ideals of the nation states will have long since burst under pressure from the internal divisions. And that's the end of the 666 document dated end of June 1967. Isn't that crazy? 18 years later, or 666 in time, 3 times 6 equals 18, or 666. Another important meeting was held in Canada. The 666 group met again in Toronto at the end of June 1985, but this time to finalize the last steps leading to the collapse of nation states and the seizure of international power by the United States. Did not know this. Red Dawn. The document Red Dawn, Globalist Project Goal, Establishment of the World Occult, Means of Financing Project, Control of IMF, GATT, Brussels Commission, NATO, UN, and other international organizations. The document. The last 18 years were very profitable for the progress of our world projects. I can say to you, brothers, that we touch now almost the goal. The fall of the nation states is not more than a question of time, relatively short, I have to admit to you confidently. Due to our infiltration agents and our colossal financial resources, unprecedented progress has now been made in all areas of science and technology, of which we control the largest corporations financially. Since secret meetings with M.D. Rothschild within the 56 years, which we were aimed at finalizing the development and implementation of the world computers, it is now possible to foresee the establishment of a kind of international highway where all these machines are interconnected. Because, as you already know, the direct control of individual populations of the planet at the very least would be totally impossible without the use of computers, electronic, and attaching them to each other in a vast global network. These machines also have the advantage of replacing millions of people. In addition, they have neither conscience nor any moral, which is essential for the success of a project like ours. Above all, these machines do, without question, everything is dictated to them. They are perfect slaves, which our predecessors have dreamed, but not that they were able to doubt that one day it would be possible to perform such a miracle. These machines, without country, without color, without religion, without political affiliation, are the ultimate fulfillment of our tool and the new world order. They are the cornerstone. The organization of these machines in a vast world network, the superior levers of which we shall control, will serve us to immobilize the populations. How? As you know, the basic structure of our New World Order consists in its essence of a multitude of diverse networks, quotation marks, each covering all the sphere of the human activity on the whole of the planet. Oh, we got Facebook, we got social media, think about it. Until this day, all these networks were interconnected by a common ideological base, that of the man as being the center and the ultimate fulfillment of the universe. So, thanks to all these networks, united by the link of the new religion of man for man, we were easily able to infiltrate all the human sectors in all the Western countries and to modify the Judeo-Christian base. The result is that today this man, that is a part of politics, of the social, the education, of the scientific, or of the religious, already has, since our last reunion of the end of June 67, abandoned his past inheritance to replacing it by our ideal of a world religious based only on the man. Cut off then he is from now, let's see, I didn't say that right. Cut off then he is from now on from his historical roots. This man does not wait anymore in the end, as he is proposed a new ideology. This, properly understood, is ours, that of the global village community, which will be the center. And this is precisely what we will give him, encouraging him to take part, body and soul, in this global electronic network, where the borders of nation states have been forever abolished, wiped out to their deepest roots. While this misled man will be absorbed by his blind enthusiasm to be a part of its new world community, by being a part of this vast network of computers. For our account, we shall see from the superior levers which will be hidden from him to file, to identify, to record, and to make profitable according to our own objectives. Because inside this new global society, no individual having a potential of profitability for us cannot escape us. The constant contribution of the electronic technology will have to assure us all the means to file, identify, and control all the individuals of the populations of the West. For those who do not represent exploitable profitability by ourselves, we will ensure they are eliminated through all the local civil wars that we have taken care to break out here and there through the work of our servants and the fall of the economy of the nation states and the oppositions and claims of various groups within those states. Here is thus the detailed manner by which we shall proceed before 1988 to pave the road to the birth of our world government. And I'm going to end that there. We will pick up later. As a matter of fact, it keeps coming to my mind. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to reread everything later from the very beginning, but I'm going to keep this up, then take that down, and then reread it so it's more clear, because just how it's worded, I don't know, maybe it's because they're foreign, I have no idea, but they just, I don't know, write it kind of funny. So anyway, until later, keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters, and your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And let us embed the Word of God upon the tablets of our hearts, so you and I will not sin against God or be deceived. Have a great day.